Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the general elections coming up in November, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about these polls that have been coming out more and more recently in favor of Kamala Harris and her bid to maintain control of the White House coming this November. Now, I know a lot of people have been freaking out recently over Harris overtaking Trump in a lot of the key swing states and in the national polling, and we're going to be talking about why this is happening and breaking it down in a way that makes sense for the average viewer. And with that being said, if you guys do find this enjoyable, remember to leave a like on the video, hit that red subscribe button, click that little notification bell to never miss out on another upload. And with that being said, let's get started. So, a lot of people have been, generally speaking, terrified at the prospect of a Harris administration. And as we can see, Kamala Harris has actually overtaken Donald Trump in the national polling average. And we're also seeing the same thing kind of happen in a lot of the critical swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin. So, the first thing I am going to point out about these polls that we're seeing is that they are not entirely accurate. They're very misleading, and I'm going to show you exactly why. So, let's take a look at the state of Wisconsin. The state went to Biden barely back in 2020. And if we look at the polls that we're having now for Kamala Harris, she's only at 1.2 percentage points. Now, that might seem like a lot in a critical swing state like Wisconsin. However, let's take a look at the polls back in 2020. The polls on RCP had Biden winning by 6.7 percentage points. Obviously, that did not happen. That is a 6-point poll error in the average on RCP. And some of these polls, I mean, come on, Biden plus 11, Biden plus 10. And if you scroll down and just look at some of these polls, only one poll had a tie. We had some really crazy polls like Biden plus 17. We had one poll all the way down here say that Trump was going to win the state by 1 percentage points. 12, 10, 10, 9, another 10. I mean, this is ridiculous when you consider what actually took place in 2020. So when you compare these polls from 4 years ago to the ones we have for Kamala presently, things start to look a little bit different, because if there is a 5 to 6% poll error, we could see something like this take place in a state like Wisconsin. And this is a very critical swing state, and we'll cover the rest of these states in a minute based off of the polls. But if you look back even at 2016, Wisconsin wasn't even supposed to be that competitive. Again, we're seeing about a 6-point percentage poll error in the state of Wisconsin. And this isn't unique to just Wisconsin. No. This is very much a problem across the board. Let's go to 2020. Look at the state of Texas here. We're seeing another massive poll error. We had polls that said that the election was tied in Texas. That is insane. These polls were obviously off. Now, obviously, the majority of the polls said Trump was going to win the state, but Biden plus 3 in Texas? No, I don't think so. So you have to really evaluate these polls and look at them with a grain of salt. Look at the polls out of Florida. They said Biden was going to win the state by about a percentage point. Well, they were wrong by over 3 points. And once again, we have a whole bunch of polls that are very, very much unrealistic. Like Biden plus 5, plus 6 in Florida, plus 11? No. Plus 13? No way. And so that's something that has been an issue with polling for a very long time. At the end of the day, once again, you have to take a lot of these polls with a grain of salt. Now, an example of when polling was absolutely spot on was Nevada. They did get Nevada right with the RCP average. However, some of these polls were just unbelievable. Biden plus 11, plus 8, plus 7 in Nevada. This is a state that shifted to the right when pretty much every other state, with an exception of maybe Florida, shifted to the left. So it's not impossible to say that the same thing is happening again. And if you apply these polling errors to 2024, this actually does put Trump in a really, really good position. And it's not just the swing states. We're seeing this happen all over the country. I mean, they're making Montana in some of these polls to be more competitive. And so it's, again, something you have to take into consideration. The polls have not been consistent, they've been all over the place. In 2016, Wisconsin wasn't even on the table as a competitive state. They had states like Colorado that were competitive, like 2.9% in Colorado. That's unthinkable now in terms of an election that we're facing. So a lot of these polls, they're not accurate. They're, in my opinion, hogwash. The only reason we saw Trump winning so badly against Biden is that Biden was insanely unpopular. And the reasons that you're seeing this massive surge for Kamala Harris across the country isn't because Kamala Harris is suddenly gaining all these Trump supporters. For example, again, go to Wisconsin. She's not picking up tens of thousands of Trump supporters that were planning on voting for Trump just 3 months ago. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the Democrat voter base is getting enthused because they've had to work with Joe Biden as their head of their party for the last several years. And after that debate, after everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it's pretty obvious that Joe Biden wasn't going to be able to defeat Trump. And to a lot of these people who hate Trump, the idea of him being the next president is unthinkable. And for them, Kamala Harris is somebody who can actually go out and win. So we're seeing this massive surge. It's, again, not Republicans turning Democrat. It's Democrats getting enthused to get behind Kamala. And she's also not been attacked. So in a place like Wisconsin, for example, she doesn't really have room to grow. I mean, I could see a place like Outagamie County getting a little more competitive. This is where Appleton is. Appleton is definitely a city that has shifted to the left. The same could be said of Dane County. This is where Madison is. This is, as I like to call it, the People's Republic of Dane County. This place is so incredibly blue, it's insane. And you might see some of these counties surrounding Madison get a little more blue, but at the same time, a lot of people are moving out of places like Milwaukee, which is going to have a effect on the Democrats' ability to be able to defeat the Republicans in this state, which, again, if you take a look at some of these counties, they're going to become more and more powerful in terms of pushing the state farther and farther to the right. They're going to make the state more and more red. And this same effect, by the way, is what happened in Iowa. If you look back at Iowa, a lot of these counties, the rurals shifted to the right, and that is what is keeping this state so Republican. So at the end of the day, a lot of these polls, they're hogwash in my opinion. If you take the polling error into consideration, Trump is still winning states like North Carolina. He's still more than likely going to win a state like Nevada. And if you even look at the present polling out of the state of Nevada, things for Trump are looking fairly good. He's still winning this state by 3.5 percentage points, which is pretty good considering the fact that Trump never even won this state in 2016 or 2020. Now, in regards to outliers, I will say I think that this 10% margin for Trump is an outlier. I think that's a little bit questionable. However, Emerson is a little bit more reliable, I would suppose, and even they have Trump up by a significant margin. The New York Times has him up by a significant margin. So it's really hard to say what exactly will happen. The no taxes on tips policy in the state is something that is very popular in Nevada, and Kamala Harris really didn't do herself any favors by plagiarizing herself in terms of his policy on no taxes on tips. It made her look really weak, in my opinion, and she must be very desperate if she's going so far as to steal Trump's policies in a state like Nevada. So this right now does put Trump in a really good position if he's able to win Wisconsin, if he's able to win Nevada. All he really needs to do is win one or two more states, depending on which state it is. And as of right now, a lot of the polling that we're seeing out of a place like Pennsylvania, for example, it is still favoring Trump. And again, you have to take into consideration that we're seeing a lot of Democrats come home to Harris. And we'll have to see how things play out. If Trump is smart, he will hammer her on crime. He will hammer her on her policies. He will do everything he can to tie her in with the Biden administration, because at the end of the day, the Biden administration said that they would not ban fracking on federal land, and then they turned around and did it anyway. So we'll have to see how this plays down in a state like Pennsylvania. If Trump is able to pick off Pennsylvania, this would put him at exactly 270. If he is able to win a state like Georgia with Pennsylvania, he again wins by 270 electoral votes. So it's very interesting, because even though the polls are shifting against Trump, he is still, in my opinion, the favorite to win. And in my experience in at least the state of Wisconsin, when I've done canvassing deployments, I can say that this is a state that I just don't think that Harris has what it takes to keep the state blue. There's definitely a lot of Democrats here, but at the same time, there's also a lot of Republicans, and we'll have to see how she handles the barrage of attacks that are going to come her way. The Israel-Palestine conflict, it's not something that a lot of people in a place like Wisconsin are thrilled by. And although Kamala Harris is probably going to do better in a place like Michigan, just because this is a state with a larger Muslim minority, at the end of the day, if you pander to the far left on the Hamas issue, you're going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot with a lot of these more moderates across other states, like North Carolina, for example. This is going to be a huge problem for Kamala Harris if she wants to go for the state. You could say the same thing out of a state like Arizona. This is a state where there's definitely a lot of buyer's remorse. I actually worked with somebody who has done a lot of in-depth work in places like Maricopa County, and at the end of the day, the state of Arizona is probably going to go for Trump, because there's definitely a lot of buyer's remorse. In my opinion, what you're probably going to look at, if things go the way they continue to go, Trump's probably going to win Wisconsin by about 1 to 2 points. I think he wins North Carolina pretty handily. I think he's going to carry Nevada handily. And if he wins Arizona, all he really needs to do is pick up one of these other states. You could argue that Harris wins in Michigan, but at the same time, you could argue once again that the no fracking on federal land policy that Biden said, by the way, he wouldn't do, puts Pennsylvania into his column. So at the end of the day, even if the black women turnout for Kamala Harris is enough to keep Georgia in her column, which, by the way, the polls are not showing that, it will still be a Trump-Vance victory, and I think that the 2nd congressional district for the state of Nebraska narrowly goes for Harris. So this would still be a very competitive race. Even if Harris wins Arizona, all Trump really needs to do is carry the states of Pennsylvania or Georgia and Pennsylvania or any other combination that gets him to 270. And at the end of the day, I think that states like Arizona still go red, and there's always the option of seeing how things play out in a place like Virginia. I know that some of the polls in Virginia have been more competitive. They did elect Glenn Youngkin, who has been a more popular governor in the state. So at the end of the day, things are going to go the way they're going to go. Freaking out over polls that are just so unrealistic, and we saw this again in 2020. So it's not, in my opinion, realistic to freak out about all this. And as somebody who's worked in these swing states as a canvasser, as a door knocker, somebody who's talked to a lot of voters, I can tell you guys that we're not seeing a massive flip of Republican voters going for Democrats. It's, if anything, it's the other way around, with disenthused liberal voters who aren't exactly happy with the prospect of supporting someone like Kamala Harris. She is from California. California isn't a state that people generally associate with good things as of right now. So yeah, that pretty much wraps everything up, guys. I would encourage you, if you're on the right, to not let the polls bother you too much. If we're seeing these same polls like a month before the election, then we might have a problem. But at the end of the day, I do think that Trump is still on track to win this election. He'll probably carry the state of Georgia. He'll probably carry Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. And the only place that I would seriously question his ability to win would be the state of Michigan as of right now. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys found this video informative. If you did, remember to leave a like on the video, hit that red subscribe button, and click that little notification bell to never miss out on another upload. And with that being said, have a good rest of your day.